Hello and welcome to the Transform You Live Show, the Transform the Letter You Live Show, where we dig into the stuff that matters, faith, growth, and real transformation. I'm your host, as always, Marcus Hart, and today we are going to be stepping into a conversation that's going to hit home for a lot of you, especially the man out there. We are talking father-son relationships, healing wounds, and finding a way forward with grace and grit. Our guest is Michael J. Wolak, a faith based speaker and author who's been lighting up stages since 2021 with wisdom on everything from communication to marriage, singleness, and get this, the healing that can happen between a father and his son. His new book, Loving Your Father, even though he, a guide for man, is all about acknowledging, preparing for, and tackling those father wounds head on. So let's talk with Matthew. I'm glad he's here, and we're going to dive in.
All right, Matthew, let's set the stage here. You've been out there speaking truth into man's lives, body language, persuasive speaking, marriage, singleness after divorce, and now this powerful focus on father-son healing. What's your heartbeat behind your journey? And the follow-up question behind that, how did you go from all these diverse topics to writing a book that's laser focused on helping man navigate their relationship with their dad?
That latter part of the question will really help me out in how I answer. In my 22 plus years as a believer, the thing that I noticed was it's incredibly hard for men to share their problems in general. And I
Okay.
took this. I don't know if you ever heard of 33 the series. It's a 6 volume set on authentic manhood, and one of them gets down into the grit of both a father wound and a mother wound. And what's wild is they talk about how easy it is for somebody that's a son to deal with it if it's with mom. They'll pick up a piece of paper, write a letter, make it happen immediately. But when it comes to dad, they
That's
may not
true.
even pick up the piece of paper
Yeah.
and they bury it. And
Mm.
and I was thinking to myself, man, if it's that hard already for men in the body of faith to have trouble communicating their problems, then this one's going to be impossible. And if they don't have some kind of a resource to feel like is an outlet for them, they're screwed. And I was just like, man, I gotta help guys out with this. And you know, the other thing that I noticed was if I was gonna write a story and help guys out, I needed to be able to provide them hope. And I thought, wow, well, I've got a story I think everybody can relate to if they had issues with their dad as a kid. I had issues with my dad, didn't feel like he did a great job raising me. Didn't really connect with him, didn't give me substantive direction on life, whether it was females or jobs or anything like that. And I didn't really have the direction that I needed. But then, as the Lord would have it, He reconciled our relationship in my adult life, and our friendship, I would call it, flourished. And that's amazing to me because I didn't see any hope in sight as a kid or a young teenager. It's just the same old drab relationship with dad. I thought, man, if guys have hope, they can do a little bit more. They won't remain as closed without it. So I thought I could write a story to help them along.
And that's real, and I love that. I love how you zeroed in on this. And when you talk about get the disconnect we have with our fathers growing up and how hard it is to express ourselves because we see the dad as an authority figure. We see the dad as like the one who's stoic and very hardcore. I know like most of the bloomers, that bloomer generation, that generation before the bloomers, my dad, he was around the generation right after the bloomers. And I'm 39 now. And growing up, I had a very difficult time with my dad as well. And then right after that, it wasn't until I went to the military where I saw the value in trying to like make that connection with him and allow things to just get better between us. I took that initial approach. And so this is This is very timely. This book is very much needed, and your book, which is titled "Loving Your Father," even though it's
Dot
got
dot
that,
dot.
that fix. Yeah, that's got that pause to it. Was there a moment in your own life though where you said, "I gotta help man through this"?
You know, it evolved over time. Do you mean with this specific topic or in general?
Just in general.
In general, I noticed it in small group settings first and foremost. You know, whether I was leading the small group study or I was just in the study, I always would just notice people, sorry, not people, but men would just sit quiet.
Yeah.
And what I think it comes down to is men have this perception that they need to be a certain way. And if they don't have permission to open up, they're going to stay closed. And I thought to myself, man, I just want to start talking and open up about whatever the hard question is just to get the other men in the room rolling. And I just became very intentional about that. I did it every time I saw the opportunity. And it was purely just because I know it's hard for them. Now, I have no trouble communicating. I don't know, God bless me with a tongue that just keeps on going. But other people, man, they don't have it that easy. And then, couple that with the fact that they're men, and then they just get stuck. And God doesn't want us stuck. He wants us to work through our junk. And I just wanted guys to have that opportunity. And I don't know, maybe it was like a little mini ministry over the years, just trying to cater to them to help them out a little bit.
It's definitely a ministry. The work you're doing is definitely a ministry, and you're really attacking the guys who's carrying this stuff around and don't even know where to start to unpack it. And your book, you're talking about acknowledgement. You talk about preparing. You talk about discussing these wounds in a safe space. Wounds are heavy, man, especially father wounds, and we know just from the climate we in right now. You got things popping up like the red pill, which the red pill has been around for years, but it's become more popularized in the main culture. And then you have these different campaigns that has popped up, the Me Too movement, and all these other things that really make it hard for man to just come out of that shell. So what's the first step of acknowledging? What does that look like for you? For a guy who's maybe been avoiding it his whole life.
That word permission that I mentioned earlier, I think that's what it comes down to. When I'm the guy in the room that opens up to get other guys to open up, it gives them permission. And the permission is take the perception of who we are as men and stop worrying about how we look. And that permission is permission to acknowledge how our Father hurt us, or permission to admit our weaknesses, or to be vulnerable. Jesus did a really good job himself of being all those things and more. But we have been taught from a very young age that that's not the way men roll. Men are supposed to be tough. They're supposed to. It's all about grit. If you're closed up, you're closed up. You brush it off. You don't acknowledge as you go through the process. But with this one, like you just said, Marcus, it goes so deep that some men don't even know it's there. But for the men that do know it's there, it's that much harder because dad is elevated to this superhero status just because he's dad. You mentioned it. We hold them to this authority, and that's a gift. That's what God made fathers to do. And if they falter below that, then there's that wound. But because it's elevated so high, think of it the reverse. If I'm here and this is the level of water, it goes down the water and then down as deep, the opposite direction, and it makes it that much more impossible for men to touch on it. And they don't want to look weak by saying that they're hurt. It's not a word we love to use as men. We don't, and vulnerability is certainly not acceptable in the culture. It's frowned upon. And we have a few outliers out there, speakers and influencers that teach us the opposite as believers, but we need to hear that because there's nobody telling us it's okay. We need that permission to be able to do it. And And if no one ever tells us we've got the permission, then we're just simply not going to do it. We're going to stay stuck, even though it's hurting us, even though we know it's impacting our families, even though we know it's impacting our jobs. We're just going to leave it there. But my hope is that, and my prayer is that it goes the opposite for y'all.
I agree, man. And as you was talking, one thing that came up for me is I used to always hear, especially when I was in theology school, like the foolishness of the cross. And like I always like, what is the foolishness of the cross? But like what it is like, being able to follow, someone like Jesus, as you mentioned, who was humble, who was gentle, who was, empathetic, and who didn't mind, showing his weakness and laying his life on the line and dying for all of us, but everybody was expecting this strong, stoic guy to come and turn over, Israel inside out and redeem Israel by force. But that's just not, that just wasn't the way Jesus taught it. And now we have to learn from that example on how we can still be masculine man and at the same time embrace love for ourselves. And like you said, that being able to recognize our brother who may be struggling to be the one to, raise their hand and say, you know what? I was bullied as a kid. I was beat by my dad. My dad beat me. He was abusive towards me and, and this hurt me, this affected me this way. And that's where it's it, man. It's so simple and we're simple creatures as man. And it's that much powerful in the work you're doing. And I can feel the weight of that already, so once a man has faced it, acknowledged it, what's next for them?
Well, if I could rewind just a second before I answer that question and share a scripture, I don't have it memorized, so I'll read it. But it's from
Mhm.
John 11:32 through 36. You'll probably recognize the story, but it says, "Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, 'Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died.' But Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping. He was deeply moved." Check that out. Deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. Another one, greatly troubled. And he said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." It says Jesus wept, period. Then it says, so the Jews said, "See how he loved him?" And they only knew that he loved him because of the fact that he wept and the fact that he was allowing himself to feel. And,
Yeah.
to say you're deeply moved is a serious thing. And to say you're greatly troubled is a serious thing. But you talked a little bit about it. If that guy, like you said, raises the hand and says, this is what I'm dealing with. This is what happened to me. The interesting thing is we have it in our minds to believe that that's going to get rejected. But in the Christian faith, what we find is the opposite. Me and you are brothers in Christ. You tell me that, man, I want to come alongside you and help you along. I'm not going to be like, "Marcus, what's your problem, bro?" Try to shove you off to the side. That's not how we roll. And that's the interesting thing. It's a misperception. We've almost made it up in our minds, and we come to this expectation because of what we're taught. And it's just not the love of Jesus. And now what he teaches us in his word, that's just countless examples of what he does in the word to speak to the opposite. We need more word, man, more word.
It's true. That's true.
But to answer your question, at the other part, when you mentioned once you get to acknowledgement, what happens next? Well, first let me say, you get to that spot, it's a great day. Once you know what it is and you can identify it and you can say, this is what happened with my dad.
Right.
It can be succinctly, you just like you said, I got beaten up as a kid. I got bullied as a kid. That's what happened to me. It doesn't have to be complex. Once you say that, now all of a sudden you open the door to let yourself feel like we talked about, but you're also in a position now that you understand it for yourself to start to pursue your dad. And that's the important part, because holding on to it's not going to do any of us any good. And the relationship with dad is not going to get any better if we just hold it to ourselves. We have to start preparing for a conversation with our dad, for those of us who have our dads that are still with us. Now, just to speak quickly to the folks whose dads have passed, that process isn't any different. Working through that acknowledgement, it's just now you're going to deal with it with the body of Christ and in community, as well as your heavenly Father, to work through it. You may not be able to speak to your dad here because he's gone. But if he is here, we've got to start this process where where we go after the conversation, understanding that it's a pretty serious thing to endeavor after this conversation. It's like, if we're gonna approach our dad, it's a significant thing. And if there's anything that I've found in my walk of faith is we really need to submit these kind of decisions to God first. And there's always prayer. Prayer is one of the simplest things we can do at any time during the day. You can say anything we want to the Lord. Just, hey, I need help here. Can you guide me here? I need some direction. And He's there to honor that. What I find that's difficult is when we're making a decision. I don't know if you ever identify this with this, Marcus, but we're moved one way or the other sometimes by our emotions or even our physiology. I joke even what we eat sometimes impacts how we feel, and we might make a decision off of that. And if that's the case, to discern wisely, I think we really have to first ask God, hey, is this okay with you? And then bring it before His throne to make sure we got that answer right. And how I suggest doing that, how I recommend doing that is getting into Scripture. Let's say you've got a decision to make. It's 3 weeks away.
Mhm.
I say, all right, Lord, this is a big decision I'm trying to make. I'm going to spend time in your word for a half hour every other day for 3 weeks straight. And I'm doing that seeking for your wisdom. I'm feeling like this is the right way to go, but I'm going to use your word to help guide me even further. And what I found is I either know yes or no on what I'm asking to go forward on or not. Or if I can't discern either way, I know as I've grown, I've just learned, it's my call to make, and God's not going to be upset with me if I make a call. And once we've got that, now we can go to God and say, all right, I want to talk to my pops. Is it cool to do this thing right now? And God God might have laid on your heart, yeah, right now is excellent. Let's do this. Or He might say no, and you're discerning, feeling like that's not the right way to go right now. But let's say the ground is fertile for that conversation 3 years from now, and God's got it all lined up. But He wants you to know, hey man, I want you to pray, discern, include others as you go towards this. Maybe down the line in a few years, this is a better fit for y'all to strengthen your relationship. We don't know the answer. All of us are praying, asking for this answer, for this wisdom, but He's going to give it to us, and we just need to be ready for that, because it's not always healthy. Like, let's say we had a violent dad. Does it make sense to get in the same room and start talking about how you didn't think he was a good dad? He might get, I'm not laughing at this scenario, but probably not, because he might get violent all over again if he doesn't know Jesus and didn't change his life or anything since you know him as a kid. So we've got to be wise and discerning and make sure that we're letting God take the wheel. You know what I mean? Because we want to. We've gotten this far. Now we're ready to burst with it, but I want to do it in the right way.
That's a big one, man. And I love that we discussing this. And for a lot of my listeners, they may be thinking, and I already know how to do this because I took the approach, and after looking at your book, I was like, man, this is like the whole thing I was going through for a long time, and I'm gonna get through it. But there's a lot of my listeners gonna be like, Marcus, I can barely get my dad to talk about the weather, let alone this.
Yes,
So,
sir.
what's one practical tip you give a guy to open that door with his father, even if it feels awkward or scary?
Appreciate that question a lot. It's an important one. My background, Marcus, is in sales. I spent 15 plus years in the marketplace selling. And if there's one thing I learned along the way that was very important was gathering intel. And that intel was knowing who I'm calling, but also knowing who I'm calling, a bit about their company, their competitors, what they might be suffering through or going through as a business, where they might need help. All of that work before I make the first phone call needs to be intact. And the reason is because if I come in with that intel, I'm set up to have a better conversation to start. And with that, dads can be difficult, man. They're not easy, but are they difficult with everybody? You know what I mean? Are they difficult with mom? Are they difficult with the guy they talk shop with? Is there a guy he goes to the gym with or works on cars with? What about the guy you see him with all the time at work, or someone that you can see they communicate openly and freely? Now, what's wild is each one of those people, whoever they are, doesn't have to be any single one of those. It could be a combination of them. They can give you intel on how to approach your dad. And I call that getting through your dad's defensive line. And it's important because your dad just wants to go boom wall. Think of it, if I come in the door swinging, Dad, here's what I want to have a conversation with you because I want to tell you how you failed as a dad. You know how I don't think you were a good dad. You do that, the door is shut. Boom, closed. You're not getting in that. And if you try to approach it again, you probably won't get a second chance. And what I found is that's no different from my sales background. If I'm calling a vice president and I don't come in ready for that call and I don't understand that every word is critical, he's not going to give me another shot, or she's not going to give me another shot. I could keep calling back. I'm just going to be an annoyance. They're never going to pick up the phone. Or if I do get them on the phone, didn't I talk to you last week? I'm not interested. You know, they shut you out for a good reason because you're not prepared. You're not ready. And it's humbling to have to go ask questions and figure it out. But what if your dad's right-hand man, we'll call him the closest guy in his life, what if that guy was willing to join you in going to initiate the conversation with your dad? What if you talked to him separately and said, hey, I want to approach my dad on this topic. Can you give me a few ideas on approach? And you know what, better yet, would you mind joining me to kick that off? And let's say that person agrees and says, yeah, I'll help you out. I think your dad needs to talk to you about this stuff. You know, if you've got a strained relationship, I want it better for you guys, and helps you along. It's like an introduction, you know,
Yeah, it
and
is.
you get introducing it with somebody that makes him, he's got a comfort level with that person that he wouldn't have with others. So I want to encourage y'all. There's a lot of ways. It's not impossible. God can even give you the way. A quick story, if you don't mind. When my dad passed, my brother and I were the sole recipients of everything in his will. And he had a car, and I needed a car. And my selfish mentality was that car should be mine. My brother's got a car, he's good. But I know my brother. My brother he's a negotiator, he's a businessman, he's got a background in sales, he's a smart dude. And if I were to come in with that attitude to my brother, asking him about the car, that wouldn't go well. You know, like my brother would say, let's sell the car and let's split the proceeds and we're good to go. It'd be a simple conversation. But when I went to the Lord on it, I said, Lord, can you help me with this? I would like this car. Can you give me some wisdom on this? And the thing I felt like I should do was simply ask my brother. And I got on the phone and I talked to my brother. I said, would it be all right if I had Dad's car? And there was a pause, I think, for a moment. And he goes, you know what? Yeah, you can have the car. You need a car. You know,
Yeah.
he didn't worry about any money that he could have made. He could have made money. I mean, it's thousands of dollars when it comes to a car, you know? And out of my pride, you know, there was money owed on the car. And I'm like, oh man, well, I'm going to pay it off anyway, you know, like my attitude was just not good. But that question, asking him that question was the right way and approach that got through to him. And that guy in his life, or your mom that knows the thing that's always failed her that she learned along the way does work. You want that intel. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you want to get through to your dad. If you can win that conversation, man, that conversation is going to be blessed because you're even allowed to have it. Just having it, you know?
And that goes back to like, what I was talking about earlier, like how guys are simple, man. Sometimes we don't need a whole, script or anything to really just like have these exchanges with each other and get things accomplished. Sometimes it's just a head nod or something, but like,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
that's funny though.
It's
Like
crazy.
it's
We know
funny
what
and
each
that's
other's
good.
saying. We don't even say a word,
Exactly.
you know? It's
Yeah,
like
that's
you
pure.
walk into a room, you got this ice glare between two people, but when you nod, other person nods, it's understood. That is respect. But if you were
Exactly.
mean mugging and you kept that intense glare, then that person, what's happening inside them? They're starting to rise up. So like, what? You want to fight me or something? Like the whole thing is different, but simple now. Like, what up? Then you get that mutual respect in 1 second.
Right. Yep.
One
Yeah. And
second.
everybody's on an equal playing field after that. So
Yep. Yep.
the competitive spirit is like brought down a level.
Yes. Yes.
So man, that is pure gold. I love it. And, I can see how, this could shift like legacies. And
Mm,
I got to
it's
ask you, man,
encouraging to me.
because faith plays a big role in your work, how does like leaning on, well, you kind of answered that, I don't really want to, but you know what? Here we go. This is how I'm going to frame it. I'm not going to frame it the way I was going to frame it initially. Like, so, we know that dads have imperfections, man. And then some of these imperfections kind of rubbed off on us, or we had developed our own unique imperfections. So how do we use God, to deal with like those who are wrestling, with dad's imperfections, like, help along with the healing process?
Man, the first thing that comes to mind when you say that is applying grace. And my gosh, my wife and I used to volunteer for Big Brothers Big Sisters, if you know the program. And we had
Yeah.
what's called a little. We started out with him when he was a 9-year-old boy, and it was this big fishing event that was happening. There was kids and their dads and moms fishing. There are tons of them, like 100 different families around this pond all fishing, and it was just there to help the kids learn how to fish, have some entertainment, catching fish. And we walked up to the pond, and you know he had the rod in his hand, and I'm standing there looking at him, expecting him to make this happen. Figure it out with the rod,
Yeah.
start casting, man. Like this, go do it. And it was it was the same way my dad almost would stand there with me, where I'd be like, Dad, teach me, man, teach me. And I just longed for that. I don't know that I could have articulated it back then, but I knew that I wanted my dad used to shoot bow. I was like, I would want to be like, Dad, let me shoot bow. Give me a bow. But it was always this weird standing there, like not helping. And so I stood there not helping. My wife said, "Are you going to help?" And what's even crazier is there's this guy standing right next to me, and he's got this little girl. Man, she had to have been 5. And he was just gracious beyond words. He was so kind to her. He goes, here's how you do it. Here's how you put it together. We're going to get this thing going. And I'm thinking, I'm witnessing this example, and I'm still not doing this example that's sitting right in front of me. And because of that, we just have to understand, man, in our frailty, we're all broken. And what's
Yeah.
crazy is, there's these wonderful scriptures like Hebrews 4:16 says this, let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. And when you hear the segments of that sentence, draw near to the throne of grace, first off, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need, to find help in time of need. There's this God that we serve that wants to help us, gives us his word to see he's going to help us, but we get to draw near to the throne of grace with our sin even. We get to go to the go to the throne and say, "Yo, Lord, I messed up." And he says, "Let us then with confidence draw near to that throne of grace, that we may receive mercy." And think of it, man. In my life, whenever I've gotten mercy, let's just even say like a simple example. I go to a store that doesn't do returns without receipts. I don't have that receipt. Their
Yep.
job is to
Yep.
say, "Nope, I'm not doing this return." But when they give me that grace and they give me that mercy and they return it anyway, man, that $25, even though it's $25 that I got back, I get the $25 back. I'm even that much more blessed because it's not something they're supposed to do. Like we don't deserve this, but God does it anyway. So we have to think of our dads as human beings just like us. And matter of fact, as I'm thinking about it right now, when we apply grace, what does it do to the other person? It melts the other person.
Yes.
It takes all the anger, all the frustration, all that out.
Yeah.
If you were to approach your dad, say, Dad, you know what? I saw how you worked all the time to provide for us. You put food on the table, we had clothes, we had a place to stay. You know, that was amazing. You start with that before the fact that he was maybe emotionally detached at home.
Uh-huh.
What's the possibility there? It's a greater possibility that that might melt dad there, standing there going, hmm. It might lower that defensive line and give you more of an open door. I do, man. When people give me grace and they talk to me softly, even if I'm trapped in my sin and they come to me like that,
Yeah.
that makes me almost admit it even that much easier.
I like that. I really love that, man. And, just really appreciating the humanity of people because you yourself know that you have fallen short and, giving people their flowers, at the same time of being able to like, kind of guide them towards like, you know, hey, this where you were, kind of feel that. And, it affected me this way, but it doesn't take away from the fact that I love you, you know,
That right there, man.
and
There you go.
that's powerful. So,
Yeah.
man, I'm gonna have to invite you back, man. We're gonna have to do a part two with something like this because
Part two.
this is an incredible conversation, and I know this is going to change a lot of man lives. This is well needed. There's a lot of young men who can use this information right now. We're living in a very crazy time right now, and it's very difficult for a lot of young men. I mean, and it's across every racial line. It's not just one race or the other. Like young men right now are in a dire situation, and a lot of them are fatherless. A lot of them got fathers, and then the ones who have already gotten to the age, where we at and beyond, they can use that reconciliation too. They can use that healing, and if we get more people to become aware of this and be voicious with this, like, man, I'm gonna do all I can to push you forward to be the
Yeah, yeah.
one. Um, yeah, we can see a lot of changes. I can see this really changing a lot of people because there's a lot of influencers who have tried and they don't do it this way. They don't do this way. They try to minimize Jesus, or they got their own spin on how Jesus is and how and use it that way. Uh, I mean, even Jordan Peterson, he as great as he is, there's a lot of things I disagree with him about. So just to wrap things up and and to like and tie it back to the book even, loving your father even though he dot dot dot. It's a guide. And what's one takeaway you hope every reader walks away with after they have worked through their process?
Just to hang on to hope. There's this scripture in Romans 8:24 through 25. It says, "Now hope that is seen is not hope, for who hopes for what he sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience." And Paul's talking about end times hope, like the groaning that we do on this earth for whatever ailments we have or issues we have, even with our dad, it's not going to be pretty all our lives. We can only anticipate going to heaven and living off that hope that when we get there, we don't suffer anymore. Well,
Yeah.
it's not too different from the suffering that we have with our dad, and the hope is still possible that things can change. And I'll say this, there was one guy that I worked with one on one, and he said, "Man, I just want to process through this thing for the first time." And I remember the first meeting we had, we sat there for about an hour and a half, and he shared his story, and it was so freeing to him. But what was amazing is that it prompted him to go call his dad for the first time in over 30 years. He went and talked to his dad. His dad took the call. His dad was in denial about what had happened. And this particular gentleman, his dad was an alcoholic and beat him, beat his mom, beat his sisters. His dad was in denial of that. But he literally said to him, "You know what, Dad? I don't hold anything of this against you." and I was taken aback going, man, like you're not holding on to any of that. And that's something that only God can do, man. So there's this healing in the process that you'll get despite the reaction of your dad or the rejection of your dad or a conversation that doesn't go well. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, but that doesn't mean they will. And even if they don't go great, God's still going to do a work in your life, man. You're going to heal.
Wow, Matthew, this has been a ride, man. I'm sitting here thinking about how many men are going to hear this and feel seen. They're going to be more equipped now, maybe even hopeful for the first time in a while. So before we wrap this up, tell us where our Transform You family can connect with you and grab a copy of Loving Your Father, even though dot dot dot, and maybe even events or any other projects you got coming up that we should know about also.
Thanks, Marcus. MatthewJWolak.com is where you can find all of that, with the exception of future dates at this point. Just more about the ministry, more about the book. The links are there to get the book. There's the way to contact me, whether it's email or phone, and would love for you to join in on the ministry. People have been getting my name misspelled my whole life. You can see it on the screen, but I'm going to say it for the people that are just listening to.
Yeah.
MatthewJWolak.com is MatthewJ, and here's where everything goes wrong. WOLAK .com, and you'll be able to find everything there.
You have it, folks. Matthew J. Wolak. We have make sure we have those links in the episode description. You'll see that in a lot of the literature that we put out every week and through our newsletter. He's dropping wisdom that can change the game for you and your relationship with your dad. So go check out his book. It's called Loving Your Father, Even Though He a guide for man, and let it be a tool to start the healing journey. If this episode hit you, drop us with a comment, share it with a brother who needs it, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on what's next with the Transform You Live show. Matthew, once again, thanks for being real with us today, blessing us, and much more blessings to you and your family, man. And so until next time, Transform You family, our family out there, keep growing, keep seeking, and keep transforming. Many blessings, peace, and lots of love. We are.
I stand for what you stand for. I'm at your door like the landlord. I can see the future, yeah, I fast forward. I get on the mic and I transform. Follow me, I'm in rare form. Follow me on this world tour. The asteroid that you can't avoid.